you, Anne, for inviting me to be part of this discussion. I am based in Cameroon, and I'm a linguist, so I work on languages and cultures more generally, and I'm heading the Department of Cameroonian Languages and Cultures at a training school in Betwa, that is in the eastern part of Cameroon, even though my main affiliation is with the University of Yaoundé. So my take on the impact of climate change, or the interrelation between climate change and digital humanities, will be addressed from the perspective of language work and language endangerment. But I would like to start. I was really very interested when Anne invited me to be part of this panel, because last year, in March of last year, we had the training session on digital humanities in French Africa, and we explicitly embraced a perspective that promoted minimal computing, and we understood minimal computing to be any effort to mitigate, to promote digital literacy, whereas mitigating the impact of the technologies on the environment and climate change. And I would like to very briefly, in 10 minutes, to highlight some of my work by drawing attention to the challenges that we face. But maybe from time to time, I'd also like to address the issue of climate change as a societal issue, maybe beyond the scope of digital scholarship. Well, my definition of ecology, because I think we need to think about this in terms of ecology. I personally understand ecology to embrace not only the natural aspect, but also, of course, the social aspect. And I think when we are talking about climate change, we need to problematize it at the intersection of these two ends, the natural and the social ecologies. And I'd like to take one example, since we are in a kind of more or less an informal discussion. So I would really like to address it, drawing from my experience. So as you may be aware of, rural exodus is a very rampant and fast growing phenomenon. So I myself am a living example of a person who had to move from, the village where I was born and grew up, to the city because I needed to pursue my education, and then etc. attend university. And now I'm working in the city. And my connection with my hometown or my home village is not as vital as I would have loved. So what is the consequence of this? The consequence is that my children, for example, do not speak my language, and I have a hard time transmitting to them the frames of knowledge, of traditional knowledge. Some of that knowledge integrates handling environmental and climate problems. So this is to show that cultural issues like language endangerment has an impact on climate change. I'll move on how I think we can address it in the area of digital scholarship. Well, how can we address it? Of course, in the domain of linguistics, since 20 years, there has been a move to tackle the issue of cultural and language endangerment by documenting these cultures so that they can be made available, so that even if now a younger generation are mostly living in the cities, they can still have access to that knowledge, and they can use it, or they can build on it to frame an awareness of how how climate environment is connected to their social life. And well, of course, this is a statement from the World Bank, that investment in the rural economy, and I will add in the preservation of rural knowledge systems, reduces pressure to the international migration. Well, now the problem is, according to me, as we embrace digital scholarship to address the issue of culture and language change with impact on the environment, we need to be attentive to how do we frame the virtues and values that pertain to this undertaking. I would like to mention, I have some notes, even though I didn't put them together as slides, so they are being shown on another computer. So now the problem is, while we document traditional knowledge so that it is available and can serve as a result, as a resource for tackling climate changes and environmental issues. How do these technologies really are accessible to those who are mostly impacted? Let me take the case of infrastructure, where cultures, well, materials stemming from language documentation and culture are stored. So it is often the time that these resources will probably not be accessible to the next generations, because they are hosted in archives located outside of these social settings. And it is often the case that these infrastructure are designed in a way that excludes the languages of those who are most in need for this knowledge, for these resources. So I think there is work that needs to be done so that infrastructure do not extend the effect of climate change and of people being disconnected from their traditional setting. I'm talking, of course, with regard to a personal experience in Africa. And I also like to mention a personal experience when embracing digital technologies and tools. And back in the workshop that we had last year, so we promoted the use of lightweight equipment, especially the Raspberry Pi brand. The problem with this type of equipment is that, okay, it really it consumes very little energy, but the problem is that the parts for these computers, these mini computers, are not available. I think in most part of Africa, they are not available in Africa. So we are being sold technologies that are deprecated the next day, and that calls for ever changing and ever update needs. Do we have the resources? Do we have the capabilities of following that pace? If I get a recording of a traditional knowledge in, let's say, oral recording, and I store it in a floppy disk, how do I ensure that I can still access that knowledge in 6 months? And what are the responsibilities of those who manufacture these goods? How do I know when I'm buying such equipment that it probably or very likely will not be useful in 6 months or so? What are responsibilities of those who manufacture those goods? Do we have regulations at the world level to ensure that these goods, these tools and technologies are not just sold, but are also sold with the responsibility and the necessary information that is needed for the users? And I would like to end, if I still have a few minutes, I guess so, with discourse that is produced around climate change and climate issues in Africa. Still, I'll try to link it with how we can engage with that from a digital scholarship perspective. Sorry. So it is often the case in Africa that climate change looks like the new business in town. So I'll just read to you this statement that I got from the website of the National Observatory of, so Cameroon National Observatory for Climate Change. So this is what they say. So I can share the link with you later on, the link to the website. In order to benefit from climate finance as a compensatory measure in accordance with Article 6 and 9 of the Paris Agreement, Cameroon must regularly produce greenhouse gases inventory reports, as well as its annual carbon sequestration potential. So you see, public engagement, especially government investment to tackle this issue, comes as a response not to the issue of climate change, but as, I would say, an opportunity to get funding. So this to me is due to the fact that scientific information that is produced on climate change is not always available to the vulnerable groups because of government and intermediacy of agencies and NGOs and etc. Information is usually filtered and recycled as a commodity. And I think as digital scholars and in digital scholarship, there is a need to address it by establishing or allowing for direct involvement, direct engagement of the communities. For example, how do we build infrastructure that can help monitor climate change and that can be accessed and that and where data can be fed into by the groups who are mostly affected. How do we design such infrastructure? How do we make them accessible and integrative? How do they accommodate this diversity of usage? So I may come after with more comments or additional ideas, but I think I'll end there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, you opened already the field quite widely, and that's with both perspectives, so the technical one also and the social science perspective. And I give the floor to Anne-Cécile.
Yes, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Great. So thank you, Anne, for the invitation. So I'm a permanent research scientist at CNRS, which is a French institute. So I'm located at the IRISA laboratory, which is in Brittany, so northwest of France, and it's currently raining here. So I work in computer science, mainly in large-scale distributed systems. So that's the system that constitute the internet. So they are constituted with servers, data centers, cloud computing, networks, and they are going up to the end user devices, so laptops, smartphones, tablets, and so on. And through these systems, they are bringing millions of applications available to the users, for instance, to pay taxes, to buy train tickets, to watch videos, to participate in social networks, to read news and so on, and obviously to work as we are doing currently for either video conference or online edition and so on. So my main research focus is on the energy efficiency of these distributed systems. So how to measure their energy consumption, how to model it, how to simulate it at large scale, and finally, how to optimize this energy consumption. So when I started my PhD on this topic, so it was 15 years ago, it was not at all a trendy topic. It was not a topic at all. Efficiency was the main quest since decades in distributed systems. So efficiency in terms of performance, in terms of computing time and so on. So the goal was to do more computation faster and possibly at a lower energy cost, but that was not the main focus, and it's still not. So with colleagues, we launched several initiatives so several years ago, first to favor the emergence of a research community working on this aspect, so the energy efficiency of distributed system, and even going further than measuring and improving this energy efficiency, meaning that we are also looking for sustainability and digital sobriety. So we are not yet at the point, up to the point where we think to digital infrastructure in a world with limited raw material, limited resources, or even shortage, with intermittent electricity, with limited computing power, but it's a start. So we are not yet there from a research point of view, but paradoxically, I'm heavily solicited for providing lectures on the environmental impact of ICT and digital equipment. So it starts to be a topic that we have to teach, and it's even written in the law in France, so for the engineering schools. So often when we are speaking about ICT impact on the environment, we are confronted with counter arguments like the fact that ICT sector is not the most emitting one. It's not emitting a lot compared to other sectors, so between 2 and 4% worldwide. And the other main argument is that ICT is helpful for optimizing the environmental impacts of many other sectors like energy, transport, agriculture, and so on. So we have smart energy, smart grids now, smart transportation, and so on. And so ICT is used in these sectors to optimize their own impact, but often there is no evaluation of the impact of the ICT that is added to these infrastructures. So not in terms of energy consumption, but also in terms of resilience, because introducing a computer device introduce as well a resilience issue, for instance, if there is electricity shortage and so on. So even so, ICT sector is not the most emitting one. It still has an impact, and this impact is growing in a manner which is not in line with Paris Agreement. And there is a collective will to reduce our greenhouse gas emission. So ICT is not only a potential part of a solution to climate crisis, but it's also an integral part of the problem. And moreover, if as computer scientists, we are not able to limit ICT's impact, well, we will not be part of the solution at all. So that's the start of awareness in our community, especially in distributed system. And currently, the main answer from, for instance, the big cloud providers like Google, Apple, Microsoft, and so on, to reduce their carbon footprint, it consists in powering their infrastructure with renewable energy sources. So either they build these sources like photovoltaic panels mainly, or they purchase it. But this solution, it only reduces the impact of the use phase, and it's usually more compensation than really consumption, because these sources, they are mostly intermittent, and the cloud provider, they do not switch off their infrastructure when there is no sun, for instance. So it's really a matter of compensation with a lot of drawbacks. So at the French scale, I'm also responsible for national working group, which is named EcoInfo, and which is working on the environmental and societal impacts of digital technologies. So we are working on how to estimate and reduce these impacts. So obviously digital objects are everywhere, and they have a complex life cycles from raw material extraction, components manufacturing, object assembly, use phase, and end of life. So the impacts are numerous in terms of energy consumption, but also resource depletion, greenhouse gas emission, water consumption, and so on. So we start to have a rough idea on how energy consumption and greenhouse gas emission are done by ICT, but mostly we have few ideas on other impacts, and our knowledge on these impacts are very poor. So it's a vast subject which is multidisciplinary, and that's one of the main difficulties. So working with specialists from different domains and communities on this subject at a national scale. And also in my lab, we are working on how we do research. So it's a computer science lab. And so we are looking for the carbon footprint of our work, so of the lab, and targeting, for instance, to reduce airplane emissions. But also we are looking at the topics we are working on. For instance, there are topics on artificial intelligence, on blockchains and so on, which are really energy hungry. And so we built a group to work on this, to think about this, so which is named Science, Environment and Society. And so the first goal is to raise awareness on environmental issues that are related to the digital technologies, because it's currently quite low. Then the second objective is to provide training, so seminars and debates on the related subjects such as ethics, epistemology, the scientific methods, science neutrality, and so on, which have to be taken into account also in the impacts of digital technologies. And finally, the third objective of this group is to exchange on how people achieve thematic reorientations, because most of our colleagues working already on computer science, they do not take into account the environmental impact yet. And if they do want to do so, they need to do some reorientation of their work, and it can be really difficult and tough. So that's it for my part.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can, I'm not sure, but I think you mentioned that once, that your lab is actually huge. It's like hundreds of people,
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, my lab at IRISA, when there are the interns, so in few months, there will be plenty of interns, and we are almost 1,000. So yeah, it's big.
So it's worth developing trainings, because that's really a lot of people. Thank you very much. And I'm passing the word to Thorsten.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you very much for the invitation to the seminar. My name is Thorsten Röder, and I'm working as a researcher and project manager in the area of digital humanities. I'm specialized in the field of digital editions and digital heritage, and I would like to show some slides, but it's not allowed, but it's not so, that's not a problem, because I can share you my text. That's okay. So I'm a member of faculty in a new department called Center for Philology and Digitality at the University of Würzburg in Bavaria in Germany. That's a new department there. It's also a new building, a complete building for digital humanities, which is quite nice. But it also points towards the small problem that digital infrastructure also is very material infrastructure. And yeah, so this, and I want to focus on a bit of a personal history, just for a start. Maybe I can show something. No, I can't. Okay. So I will just maybe share the links and the in the chat, if it's possible. I think so. Yeah. So so about in the year 1994, nearly 30 years before, when I still went to school and when digital humanities did not exist as a term, I was once allowed to skip a day in school to go to International Computer Expo in Hanover. The CeBIT, maybe you have heard of that. If not, you can just have a look at Wikipedia. It was an annual high-profile event for information technology in Germany. I think it was internationally renowned, and all the software producers and large hardware manufacturers had their representative fair booths, and they organized great shows. And Bill Gates came there and presented Windows 95 and so on. And I have also prepared a link to a contemporary computer magazine, so you can just dive into the history of this. And I remember that in one of the tiniest hall on the very large fairground, it was comprised like 20 or 30 halls. In the tiniest hall, which wasn't even findable on the plan, there was a small an exposition. It was dedicated to computers and ecology, and around 40 initiatives presented their projects there to discuss hardware recycling and energy consumption issues. And yeah, but the presentations were close to invisible, which in the large expo, and pretty marginalized in the small hall, which was also discussed in a newspaper then. I will just
you can share your screen now. I think.
That's nice. Okay, thank you very much. That will make it easier for you to follow me. Okay, now the right screen. Okay, that's the one. Okay, so that's about CeBIT. Yeah, and that is the original expo plan for 1994. And you see all the large halls for like manufacturers and software developers, and this one here in the middle, hall 15, was the building for computer and ecology. At least there was one, and that was in 1994. And having seen the presentations, then at that time, I was here's a nice website. I'm not there, but because I was just a pupil then and a visitor. But what was quite it was quite funny. They had costumes and also on. Yeah, that's how they imagined relationship to ecology between computers and ecology in 1994. And I can also share the link if you like, and because it's quite funny. Okay, that's it. And at that time, having seen the presentations, I think I was pretty convinced then at that time that digitization would actually save more resources than it would consume, and that the problems concerning recycling of devices and green energy would be all resolved soon. And it seems I was pretty mistaken. And now fast forward 20 years, 7 years forward. In the meantime, I had worked a lot in the area of digital humanities, and in parallel, I had also supported environmental movements here and there, but I never connected DH and ecological sustainability to each other. And of course, in digital humanities, and a lot of discussion is going on about data sustainability and long-term availability, but the ecological cost of that is not yet a part of it. And we have many visions also introduced on political level, like fair data, and also care data is coming up. And this does not yet include green data. And while the IT sector and also libraries are already working on their part of the problem, the DH had not started then. In 2021, I was then asked to join an initiative to promote green ideas in digital humanities, and I actually saw that as a chance to catch up. The idea was then to found a working group within the Digital Humanities Association in the German-speaking area, which comprises Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and some small parts of other neighboring countries. And the intention of that group was to build up awareness and expertise and environmental sustainability related to typical digital humanities tasks, and to take action. And there are, on one hand, some aspects which are typical for all scientific fields, as like a carbon footprint of conferences and travels. And on the other hand, there are some issues which are relevant to very specific methods and practices of digital humanities. And we intend to mainly work continuously on guidelines that address both areas, but specifically those of the DH workflow, starting with research and digitization, further analysis methods and annotation practices, and finally also communication and publication formats. And we would like to develop ideas and principles of sustainability that are easy to understand and easy to control, so that in the best case, the best of all worlds, and only a small expertise is enough to make a contribution. In our first year, we focused on the collaboration with the International Digital Humanities Climate Coalition, which was initiated, I think, during the same time. We worked together on the manifesto, which was already presented here, and we presented at the DH conference in Tokyo later. And the manifesto also got the Digital Humanities Award in that year. And we also collaboratively created the Digital Humanities Climate Coalition Toolkit, which will be presented by Elizabeth, I think. And we all started with great enthusiasm, and the initiative was very well received and welcomed from all sides. However, the number of active participants until today is quite low, and it seems difficult to activate people for the cause. And at the online conference in Tokyo last year, for example, the chair was honestly trying to induce a discussion about the manifesto, but most people hesitated to ask questions, like they were scared to buy some elephant or more than one elephant in the room, I don't know. Similarly, at the German DH conference this year, we are currently planning a workshop that to work with the toolkit actually, and some other activities. And it got the best and close to the best possible reviews, but it seems that only a handful of people will attend. And I'm wondering why that is the case. And so as much there is welcoming on one side, there is absence of engagement on the other side. It feels a bit like the Computer Expo in 1994. So everybody thinks, yeah, green ideas are great, but only a very few engage. And my current fear is that, especially with an extremely tech-positive environment like digital humanities, that ecological sustainability will be continuously marginalized, because it challenges the foundation of the business. And I honestly believe that digital humanities, they do not malintend, but it's perpetualized unconscious pattern. And we need to find strategies to break that pattern. And it just seems about time to develop some principles and strategies that can to push this into digital humanities practice, and to find some way. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you stop sharing your screen? Thank you. Great. And the last one is Lizzie. Do you need also to share your screen? Or not?
Yeah, I might share it just to.
So I'm going to make you co-host so that you don't have the problem, Thorstenhard.
Thanks.
There you go.
Great. Well, thank you, Anne, for organising this and for inviting me. And thanks to the other speakers as well. I just find myself nodding along to everything you were all saying. So I'm Lizzie. I'm a senior research fellow in digital humanities at Exeter's DH Lab in the UK. I'm also an early modernist in the English department. And I kind of wanted to start off by saying, you know, I'm definitely not an expert in climate change or in minimal computing. I guess I'm more of a concerned citizen. So I'm trying to be aware of the climate crisis while working in DH. So hopefully I can bring a kind of, you know, on the ground perspective from the UK. And also, as Torsten said, introduce the DHCC toolkit as one of multiple curators of that kit, several of whom are here today. In terms of my own research interests, I'm currently doing a lot of work thinking about early modern archives, especially state paper collections and their remediation into digital formats. So the use of legacy data and how that affects our research, how we can, you know, surface these inherited biases. So I guess that's tangentially related in thinking about, you know, the complexities and contingencies of digital access. But I've also got quite what's probably an unusual role in the humanities, in the UK at least, as a permanent research fellow rather than being attached to a specific project. A large part of my role is advising on digital humanities projects and kind of grant development, grant applications. So I joined like the toolkit working group as someone who, sees a lot of project development and research plans, and wanted to think about how to steer things more towards climate responsibility kind of on the ground. So I mentioned two different groups there, the DHCC and the toolkit working group. Qualify again, I'm introducing these as a participant, not the main organisers here. And also I'm about to go on maternity leave for a year, so I'm not actually directly working on it now, but I have had an update from the toolkit group leader, Christopher Ogue, so I'll kind of relay what's been going on kind of now and next with that as well. So I joined the Digital Humanities Climate Coalition Group back in November 2021. There was a workshop that brought together kind of various different groups and DH groups and individuals in the UK, in Ireland, in Northern Europe, wanting to reflect on digital humanities and the climate crisis. What should we be thinking about? What should we be doing? This was organised to coincide with COP26 in Glasgow, and organised by the Edinburgh Centre for Data, Culture and Society, the Sussex Humanities Lab, University of Southampton DH, and the Humanities and Data Science Turing Interest Group. And out of that workshop came kind of three working groups. One was the toolkit one. One was an information measurement and practice group, which has since developed a kind of annotated DMP or data management plan on things that we should be thinking about when writing data management plans for funding applications. And there's an influence and networks action group as well. So the toolkit group that I joined is led by Christopher Ogue, as I said, from the School of Advanced Studies. And there's been about 10 key kind of curators or authors of that toolkit, including Torsten and Anne and myself here. We launched during an online workshop in November last year. So in between those two dates, so kind of a little shy of a year, various of us kind of met up virtually. We had discussions, we had collaborative writing sprints, collaborative editing, ended up with this massive Google Doc of text across various kind of chapters and themes. Christopher and Marty Steer then converted that into a GitHub-based website using the lightweight static site generator Hugo, and then we collaboratively edited that, and it's still kind of collaborative work in process. So if I share my screen, you can see it. Let's see, can you see that there? Yeah, great. So you can see this is the landing page. There are various chapters. You can kind of dip in and out of them, or there's a suggested reading order if you want to absorb everything, a link to join the mailing list, an invitation to input into this, and we've got an introduction section on minimal computing, so thinking about things like when to use a static site versus a dynamic website, little tips that you can put in place to reduce your energy usage. Section on maximal computing, so those more energy intensive processes in digital humanities and techniques. What should we be thinking about in terms of justifying when and where and how we should use those. Section on grant writing, as it kind of says at the top, is very UK centric, so that's one thing that was kind of a bit of a challenge in putting this together, that it's been curated by several people, but still a reasonably small group that come from very specific located places. So the desire is to expand this to be more relevant to more people and more countries and areas. There's a working practices section, so day-to-day working, things like communication tools, thinking about publishing and archiving data. A section on advocacy. Obviously that's a it's another big place where we can have an impact, is starting conversations in our own institutions, joining, kind of being there in the room where possible. A section on decision trees, which is aimed at as kind of visual representation of you know, when to make different decisions about your research and the digital energy use. That's being kind of currently developed. So if you you know, are interested in contributing to that, do get in touch with Christopher and the other people. Section on climate change FAQs, which I think was largely, Joe Lindsay Waltham did a lot of that work. And because it's still an ongoing kind of collaborative thing, you know, you can suggest changes in the GitHub repository as well. So, you know, thinking about audience, it was initially envisaged as for digital humanists, but we decided that, you know, it was, since technology is so embedded in our research lives, that really it was more relevant to a wider range, a wider audience. So we kind of tried to pitch it there, kind of accessible to everybody. Currently, as I say, you know, catch-up meetings are continuing. There's work on developing the decision tree section. There's work on developing a new section on pedagogy, which I think is really important. And that's in response to feedback that was had at the launch. And some of the group, I think James Baker, Joe, Lisa Otti and Christopher are hoping to present a poster at the DH conference in Graz this July. So, you know, keep an eye out for that if you're there. And yeah, so it's all open to further development. The contact details are there to get involved. So do, you know, get in touch with Christopher or Joe or any of those lovely people to contribute. And yeah, I think one thing I kind of wanted to emphasize in closing was, you know, why did I join this? Well, kind of despite not being, you know, an expert, I wanted to see what I could contribute, what I could learn. And I think it's really important to stress that we shouldn't kind of count ourselves out because it either seems like too vast a subject or you don't feel like you have the expertise. It's very easy to do that, to count ourselves out, but it really needs us. And I think that speaks to Torsten's point as well. You know, when it comes down to it, we need more people in the room contributing to this. And I think digital humanists can really bring something particular to that conversation as well. You know, we're good at communicating between different groups and different bodies of expertise. And I think that that's really needed in this work. So yeah, I guess it comes down to the kind of not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. You know, there's it would be great if we could fix everything immediately, but, you know, try not to suffer from overwhelm and, you know, do get involved if this stuff is of interest to you, because it does, you know, relate to all of us, and it's not going away anytime soon. So I'll stop the share there. And
thank you very much, Lizzie, and everyone. I would like to ask first if the panelists have questions for one another before I get into my actual questions, because not everybody knew everybody, and maybe you have a reaction to what the others said or want to ask an additional question. No?
could I?
Yes, sure.
I don't know what, it's probably not really a question, but Emmanuel, when you were talking about that, you know, the loss of the traditional knowledge and the rural economy, it made me think of the Imagining Futures project. I don't know if you've come across that. I'll put the link in the chat in case it's of interest, but it's being run by Elena Isaiah of Exeter. I mean, lots and lots of people are involved, and yeah, they're looking also at that kind of archiving knowledge, kind of archives that are getting lost and abandoned, and it just seemed pertinent.
Okay, thank you. I'll look it up and thank you.
Okay, so you've mentioned different points we're going to discuss again now, and I think maybe starting from what Lizzie left us saying, well, the problem is I'm not an expert, nobody's really an expert, and actually in the age, that's not what we are trained to actually. I mean, our generation, we were not even trained in DH. We self-learned, so self-taught DH at some point, but the new generation receives training, and it's still not part of that training. And Cécile said in France, it's become part of the training, but for engineers. So it's not standard training. And one difficulty that we then all have, because we're not trained in this area, is that it's always extremely difficult to assess what this impact consists in to begin with, because these orders of magnitude are not evident when you are not a specialist in the area. So I would propose that we start by talking about that, about how we can assess and measure the environmental impact of digital activity, because actually when you want to start having conversations with people about that, they will tell you anything, but I read that or I heard that, and then you don't know if that makes sense or does not. So where could we start with to get informed about the way this can be measured and the way we can from there start a discussion with our colleagues. So I suppose the person who is most within this area is actually Anne-Cécile, who has been working on that, especially also with the EcoInfo group. So maybe you want to start with some input on that.
Sure. So that's a complex problem, as you said. I will speak at different level. So at a global scale, the research consensus currently is that the share of global greenhouse gas emission due to digital technologies is about 2 to 4%. So it was in 2020. And there is a paper which was written by colleagues from UK that is currently the gold standard in the field to estimate this, so at a global scale. So I just put it in the reference. So the paper is entitled "The Real Climate and Transformative Impact of ICT, a Critic of Estimates, Trends and Regulations." So that's currently the gold standard, and it means that this footprint of ICT is comparable to or even larger than commuting or civil aviation, for instance, in the same time frame. So generally speaking, as it is pointed out by the authors of this paper, these estimates, they should be treated with caution on a global scale. Because on the one hand, there is a risk of conflict of interest for some of their authors. Some of the sources are coming from manufacturers, for instance, or internet providers and so on. And on the other hand, data in this field may be fragmentary, uncertain, confidential, or even completely missing, which generally leads to a narrowing of the study parameter and thus to underestimates. So this is really a rough estimate. So moreover, almost all the studies on the global scale, they focus on the carbon footprint of ICT. So that our knowledge of other types of environmental impacts, such as depletion of abiotic resources, for instance, or water consumption, ecotoxicity, loss of biodiversity, it's currently very poor, as I was saying. So that's the first point. As for the current trend, there is still a lot of debates on this. So the growth of digital carbon footprint until 2015 seems to be a matter of consensus, as it is written in the paper. But from 2015 onwards, things are less clear. There are still debates, but ICT's emissions are most likely still growing. So it's not a good point. More importantly, it is accepted by experts in the field that without strong intervention by governments or companies, digital emissions are likely to follow a trajectory that is not compatible with the Paris Agreement, obviously. So that's for the global scale. As an individual, and especially as a researcher, measuring its own impact is also difficult. Yet there are tools and data which are available that we can use. For instance, now currently most manufacturers are delivering product carbon footprint data for laptops, smartphones, servers, and so on. For instance, Dell, HP, Apple, they are all providing these PCF sheets, so product carbon footprint sheets, which detail the carbon footprint of the manufacturing phase, so including raw material extraction, so what we call the embodied energy. It also includes the transportation of the equipment, and finally the use phase. But obviously this use phase typically highly depends on the utilization that we have of our devices. So it's better to actually measure it. So for the manufacturing phase, based on these PCF sheets, we developed in EcoInfo an online tool which is called EcoDiag. So unfortunately, it's in French, but if you can read French, it's easy to use. And it can provide the impact for a pool of digital device and for only the manufacturing phase. So I'm spending time on this manufacturing phase because it's the most important one for most digital devices. For instance, for end user device like tablets, if we are assuming a 4 years lifetime, which is quite big compared to current data, the manufacturing phase itself, it can represent up to 80% of the carbon footprint when considering an average global electricity mix. So really increasing the lifetime of devices and reducing their number, that's the two most efficient ways that we can follow to reduce our carbon footprint. So that's for the manufacturing phase. If we want to measure the use phase of our equipment, so either server, laptops, and so on, there are 3 possible ways. So the first one is to put external watt meters. So you can find it in shops. So you can plug it in between the power wall socket and your device, so on servers or laptop. And you can also on laptops and smartphones check the battery status, which can give a good estimate on the energy consumption. So that's the first way. The second way, which is quite used in literature, it's to use software watt meters. So these are based on internal hardware counters, which can measure accurately the energy consumption of the processors, the memory, and the graphical units, the GPUs. So this is only part of the consumption of the device, but there are a lot of tools, software tools, that can be integrated, for instance, with Python libraries, to capture these values. And so, for instance, there is several Python libraries that you can find, which are open source, and where you just load the library, start it at the beginning, and at the end of your computation, you have the energy consumption of your software use. So you can also use a similar tool, which is called Intel Power Gadget, and that was developed by Intel. And it plots the power consumption of the CPU, the GPU, and the memory while you are using either your laptop or server. So that's the second method. And finally, the third method, which I prefer personally, is to use models which are based on measurement at the infrastructure scale. So we have done that for several research infrastructure in France, so where we have data centers which are dedicated to research. So this last method is particularly interesting since it does not only consider the servers themselves, but also the entire infrastructure. For instance, including the storage servers, the routers, network routers, the cooling infrastructure, the lighting of the building, and so on. And also, it considers the operational side of the energy consumption of the data centers. Because, for instance, the servers, they are powered on most of the time, but not used at all the time. So sometimes they are just waiting for incoming users, and even though they are not doing anything, they are consuming a lot. And this should be attributed to users, this energy cost. So for this approach, it is important to determine the functional unit of the platform, which depends on its use. For instance, for our platform, we chose as a functional unit the computing 1 hour of core computing core utilization. So determining such a platform model, it requires a precise inventory of the equipment, so the type and number of equipment, their estimated period of use, the manufacturing carbon footprint, and the end-of-life option. So if either it will be reused within the lab, or resale, or recycled, or donated, or any other option. And so it's a hard work at first to determine all this, but in the end, it can be reused by all the users of this platform. So it's worth it. And such a method, it can also be employed a priori. So with estimates of the duration and utilization of computing resources, you can estimate what will be the impact of your future research project. And that's really interesting. And so all that, what I've detailed, it's all concerned the direct effect of ICT. We do not have yet easy ways to estimate the indirect effects, like rebound effect, for instance, since it's pretty complex as well. So that was a short version.
Can you maybe explain what rebound effects are? Because I remember it took me a while to understand exactly what it consists in.
Okay, so the rebound effect that we are considering in in ICT is usually the Jevons paradox, which was theorized by Jevons, which is a British economist. So it was proposed in 1865. So it was not about computer science at all. It was about coal, and in fact, Jevons observed that the more efficient we are in using coal, the more coal we are using in the end. So it means that the more efficient you are using a resource, here it will be for us the computing resources, the more it becomes cheaper for users, and so they are using it more. And in the end, it does not, so improving their efficiency does not end in a reduction of the usage of the resource. And that's what we observed in particular starting in 2010, when we saw the appearance of cloud computing, because we thought by virtualizing this infrastructure, we need less servers, because we can put several virtual servers on a given hardware, or a given piece of hardware, while before we needed several of them. And so we should have observed a diminution of the number of servers, and it was not the case. It exploded. And that's the rebound effect, because the resources become cheaper, and so we are using it more, and in the end, we are just using more of it. So that's one of the rebound effects, but there are many others.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the input. I think we all took notes. Maybe you can also add the link to EcoDiag in the chat.
Sure.
Great, thanks.
Even if it fits in French.
Yeah, well, you know, we'll have DeepL. I'm not sure about the impact of using DeepL on a regular basis, actually, but does anyone else wants to add something on this measurement question?
Yes, I would like.
Okay.
Sorry, please.
It's okay. It's okay. You started before me. So.
Okay, Thorsten first, then Emmanuel.
That's okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and thank you for this excellent overview. I think, and I think that's it's very useful, what you told us, and gave us an insight about what is possible measuring. I was wondering about the other side of the product, about the energy consumption on end user devices, which seems a bit more difficult to measure, or and about methods how this the energy consumption on end user devices could also be reduced, or how you could emphasize users to to change maybe their usage behavior or set some defaults on your web page, for example, to low network energy consumptions or whatever. Do you have any experience in that field?
So yes, so for the end user devices, so as I was saying, there are several tools where you can measure. For instance, the one that I'm using, I can share my screen if you want. I don't know. No,
wait. I know you don't have.
It's Intel Power Gadget, so I can show you.
You can now.
Oh, great. Up. So I think you can see it. So Intel Power Gadget is really small tool where you can see. So the first graph, it's a power, so it's in live on my laptop, and I didn't configure anything. It's just running it. So you have a frequency, because obviously the power consumption, it depends on the frequency of my processor, and currently, as I'm using Zoom, it's quite high. Then you have the temperature and the utilization. Utilization is quite low, but still the power consumption. So if I'm starting whatever, I can start to burn the CPU, you can see that it will increase. So I will not launch a video because it will pollute the Zoom, but if I'm launching, for instance, here is PowerPoint, here you see it's just launching a PowerPoint. And you can see the power consumption, the frequency, and it's still not launched. Here it is. So you see there is a huge peak here when I launched it. So that's quite easy tool just to measure and to observe what is the power consumption. So for the CPU, I can also plot the GPU, but I only plot the CPU here. That's easy way. Concerning the good practices, as I was saying, for end user device, the most impactful phase, it's really the manufacturing phase. So if you can save, if you want to save impact, you have to increase the lifetime. So it means either not buying the equipment if you can, or repair it and so on. Another important point is that most of our devices, laptops and so on, they're still consuming a lot when they are in sleep mode, or even when they are plugged, but completely switched off. So really switching them off and cutting the power, it's really important to save energy. So I don't know if it answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much for these hints. And it's I was thinking of ways how to include energy measurement into software development, right? For website development and so on. It was and many of our products, which my colleagues produce regularly, force my laptop to burn down practically, sometimes at least. And and I was thinking about how one could change a measure on one side the energy efficiency of such online products, on the end user side during the development process, and maybe it's also a good idea to offer scalable services, like a default version which is like low energy, and some special services if you want them explicitly, then you can have them at a higher energy level, maybe. Yeah, thank you very much.
Sure. So I didn't mention, well, I mentioned it all as well, but there are also like Python library. If you are developing in Python, for instance, you can use them just to have the energy consumption of your code.
Emmanuel?
Thank you.
I just want to make a brief comment. That's not really a question, but maybe first, Anne-Cécile, can you share that the name or link to that resource that you just used? I'm really interested in it. If it is free, I'm interested in testing.
Sure, it's free. It's free, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that it would be very hard to accommodate this kind of discourse, of course, it's really important that we reflect on the impact of our digital practices on energy consumption, environment, etc. But the very fact that in Africa we are still lacking access to power, to energy, makes it very difficult to to really bring this matter to the understanding of the users. So the problem is really from the other end. So we are struggling to have access to as much energy as possible. So as Aunt Cecile was talking, I was thinking of how we could frame that discourse so that it doesn't become a discourse that that nurtures other discourses on neocolonialism, imperialism, because very often it's very tempting to and very easygoing falling into this kind of discourse because they look like very easy. These are privileges of the West. They have all these big equipments and they are consuming the most of the world's available resources, energy resources, and now they're asking us to. So again, I don't have any answer. I'm just thinking about it, how we could better frame that discourse so that it really makes sense to the immediate experience of people. Yeah.
Easy?
Yeah, so only slightly related to Emmanuel's really important point there, but it makes me think of there's a section in the toolkit on whether you should footprint your project at all, and around the notion of personal carbon footprinting being first popularized by BP in the 2000s. So it's kind of big oil there, like distracting from their own culpability by putting the onus on the individual, and maybe so Emmanuel saying in some places on the wrong people. And so what do we've got lots of tips and links to further resources in the toolkit on how you can think about the energy costs of different decisions in your project as you're putting it together. But I think there's also a question of how much time you should invest in kind of measuring and drilling down into kind of individual activity and smaller scale projects. I think it's helpful to have an idea, really helpful to have an idea of these things, but it's a hard thing to do. It's not always clear, the information isn't always there, and there are other areas that are having bigger impacts and that you can also maybe have a bigger impact in as well. So yeah, just a lot of thoughts.
No, I agree. There's a lot to unpack there, because my thought was always that we should be able as digital humanists to work together. And at this point, if I consider the infrastructure Anne Cecile is talking about and the one Emmanuel is talking about, I still don't see how technically we can share things. And I think that should be the goal for everyone, that we can all share the digital products that we are developing, right? And it's been an issue for me too, for my digital edition, for instance. I've been struggling with the fact that I have these high resolution scans. I mean, who can download high resolution scans? Only people with an excellent internet connection. So what's the point of having them in the first place? And I think one of the issues is, and one of the difficulties is, just like you mentioned, the fact that the system is first for the North still trying to convince us that more is better, and the fact that each individual has to make their own effort because the system is not going to make an effort, while we should actually be steering towards the system change, actually. And exactly the fact that it's extremely difficult to compare what is happening at different places actually on the globe, and still we do the same kind of research. But actually it fits well to the next question I had, which is how we can communicate a sense of this impact of what we are doing in the context of the climate crisis, that would be communicating it to, in general, everyone, but specifically yet now to our own community of digital humanists, whom, as we have seen, do not really react to what we've been trying to do this far, and maybe we should try something else. I don't know. I'm not sure. What do you think? I mean, my tendency would be to be much more disruptive than what I've done so far, really, because I have the feeling as long as you stay in the classical academic discourse, people will sense that it's going to disturb them, and they will just like, no, I'm not going this way. So how do you think we should communicate the importance of this aspect?
Yeah, I just want to try. I'm not very sure that that makes a lot of sense, but I think it would make sense, at least in the context where I am working and living, if this issue, this discourse, can be connected to the broader discourse of epistemic injustice, because I think it has to do with how do we share? How do we have a shared discourse? How do we relate to the same issues in ways that can enable mutual input from different perspectives? The reason I'm saying this is that, again, in the South, in the global South, and specifically in Africa, we have the impression that we are catching up, or we are bound to be always catching up on something. So we don't feel ourselves as being part of the game, as being part of the agency that leads to collective move. We feel that we are just following whatever path, and we are not only following, we are really made to follow. So that's why I'm talking about how do we relate this discourse on climate change and digital humanities and digital scholarship to a broader discourse of epistemic justice. How do we accommodate the diversity of the concerns, of the knowledge, of the perspectives, and how do we relate them to our academic business, so to say. So I'm not sure that it's very coherent, but perhaps you get a hint of what I'm heading to. Yeah.
And Cecilia?
Yes, so I'm not sure I have a coherent answer as well, but with colleagues in 2020, we started to do a MOOC. So, and now it's translated into English, so you can all watch it. And for this MOOC, I made the following graph that I can share to you. So there's a French version, but you can see here. So this graph is showing on the x-axis the percentage of internet user in a given country. So for instance, I don't remember, but France is somewhere here. I can see Cameroon is here, for instance. And so you can see the percentage of internet user, and on the other side, the ecological footprint of the country. So how many earths it's consuming in terms of ecological impact. So these are standardized metrics. And that was a way for us to raise awareness on our diversity, given the countries. Sorry, because, for instance, in Western countries, obviously most of the people, they have already access to the internet, but in other countries that's really not the case. And if we are looking on the ecological footprint, it can be related to this. So it means that we have to design as a computer scientist more efficient internet access. Otherwise, it will not be possible even for all the countries. So that's kind of figures that we can provide.
Thank you. It is a really complicated topic, actually. No one from us really has an answer, and I think we're all looking for an answer to that one question. Considering the time it is, I would move to another question that is also connected to this one, and that has to do with our background, so the different countries we live in, and the structure, the political and cultural structure there is. So, and discuss with you to what extent politics engage in concrete actions in where you're from to tackle the challenge of addressing digital equipment in general and its environmental impact in particular. Lizzie?
So I was sort of having a half-formed thought that kind of, I think, relates to both the previous and this question, in that, yeah, I'm personally coming from a place of like great privilege, but also, so I was going to miss this session because the UK universities have been conducting kind of massive strike action in February and March. So as well as that privilege, I'm also coming from a sector that's kind of, you know, we all are, that's normalized this massive culture of overwork, and this culture of non-stop growth, and of this like what I would call a kind of pernicious kind of rhetoric of excellence. You know, it's always more all the time. And I think that can really act on a practical day-to-day level against the stopping and thinking that needs to happen if, you know, significant changes are to be made to our research lives. And so kind of fighting against that as a reason why people aren't engaging more, I think, I mean, it's a massive problem, but I think one thing that kind of can help is to fit into the academic structures that are already existing. So, you know, getting climate change on the books of the funding bodies, so it becomes things that we, you know, are responding towards anyway as part of the day-to-day work, getting the institutions and the career pathways that we're kind of embedded in, thinking about these already. So I guess, yeah, again, it's kind of widening out from individual activity to structural, which again is very difficult to do.
Maybe another point in this context is also, or that you could maybe elaborate on, because it's very different in every country. It's the kind of digital infrastructures that are available and that can be shared, actually, because that's actually all it comes down to. And I think it's different in the UK, in Germany, in France, and certainly than in Cameroon, I suppose.
Yeah, I responding to the question of maybe institutional or government awareness about the effect of digital scholarship and digital humanities and digital tools on climate change. I would say, again, building on my last intervention, that this is really not part of you know, the public debate. The concern is the other way. You know, government is trying to convince citizens and the public space that they will try to bring in more equipment, more infrastructures, more. So there's no awareness, no shared awareness as to how these practices impact people's life in one way or in the other, and most specifically with regard to climate change. So I mentioned the fact that in Cameroon we have a national observatory on climate change, but this is not really clearly connected. I haven't seen any provision in their missions that addresses the question of digital technologies in relation to climate change. So I don't have anything I can contribute to this debate, unfortunately, from the perspective of the place where I am now.
Well, in France, actually, everything is centralized, and in that case, that's a good thing, right? And it's you.
Sure. So we have a law that was passed in 2021, which is called Loi REEN, REEN, which is about reducing the environmental footprint of ICT. And as I was saying, part of this law concerns the formation of and the teaching of engineering school. And so that's the first step to raise awareness from an early stage in the career to the future engineers. But yeah, of course, also raising the awareness of people making laws will be useful.
Yeah, I want to try to describe the situation in Germany, which is maybe interesting for this discussion here. Yeah, of course, Germany is a federate state, and it's so which means everybody wants to have a say in everything, and which can make things complicated sometimes, and that means decision making depends on including like every person who wants to be important, and that means a way to push this topic into the on the political level would be maybe just to and then there would be, and I think there are more than one way, but one idea I had is just to on grant applications, for example, proactively talking about the environmental impact of the own project, even if it's not asked. Usually they ask about everything, about 1,000 things in grant applications, but you could just you can also write in questions, answer questions that are not explicitly asked, but implicitly asked by the overall situation, or demanded actually by the overall situation. That concerns, for example, that concerned in the last 10 years, for example, this fair data, which was slowly introduced into grant applications, now standardized. It would includes at this moment also care data, and it should include it in the near future also green data. And maybe it's a way to let it just become part of a practice and operate from the desk where we are sitting on, and just by trying to put it into a working practice like it already was. There are probably more more ways. For example, like in the working groups we were talking about, just to produce statements and to try to hand them over to political groups or decision makers. But that's another question, maybe. I wanted to address one other point, which I think Emmanuel was making strong, and which is quite important for our discussion as a whole. That the digital transformation is on the first level also a social transformation, and maybe the environmental aspects, or which is very closely related to the environmental aspects. That's not really what Anne was asking, but maybe it should be a part of the it should be a part of the solution. Thinking about the social changes or necessary social changes to build a foundation what the ecological sustainability needs actually.
Thank you. Since it's 10 to 5 here in Oxford, I would like to first, before we proceed, check if there are any questions from the audience. Charlotte, you didn't find any? No, but maybe there are spontaneous questions. I don't know. I'm not sure how the audience can signal that they have a question. Probably they would raise hands or something. Okay, through the chat. I don't see any questions from the audience. Okay, I had many other questions, but since we only have 10 minutes left, what I would actually like to do is for you to decide what you would like to state as, you know, to close the discussion, because obviously it's not going to be easy to raise awareness for this issue, to find a way to improve political steering. And maybe one thing that we can actually do is an effort in community building. We've already discussed the different initiatives we have, and they do precisely that. They do community building. And I'm convinced that this is the way to go to increase the influence of these groups. But maybe you have another perspective or another take-home message that's important for you today, that we talk about it, because I have not asked any question about it. For also considering what you see as the future of digital humanities, how can we make it somehow compatible with the current situation? When I think about it, sometimes I tell myself, actually, in 10 years, it's over with the age. We're not going to be able to do, well, anyway, we're definitely not going to be able to do what we're doing today. We're not going to compute endlessly things that have absolutely, actually no interest, just for fun. And what are we going to do if we don't work as serendipitously as we are doing now? Or maybe you have another point you would like to make. And Cécile?
So yes, maybe it's a step aside, but you will tell me. So in EcoInfo, we are, in fact, as you said, a network of people thinking about these impacts of computer science. But that's for most of us, it's not our main work. It's an additional network of researchers and engineers. But being a network since now 2006, we become at some point visible, and visible in particular for ministries. And for instance, one of the ministry in France, they asked us, it was last year, if I remember, to design a method for environmental assessment of projects that will be submitted to funding agencies. So that's the first step. So I can share it to you. And so being a network made us visible to enforce and to propose such methods at a global scale, for a national scale for now. But we translated it to English. So if you want to use it, maybe it's a first step.
Thank you. Lizzie?
Yeah, so I think just kind of concluding thoughts that, DH has always been about critiquing the digital world as well as making things. And I don't necessarily see raising awareness of environmental costs as an existential threat to DH, because it's part of our role as people who move between these different communities, these different kind of languages, the more traditional, the more academic, and the more computational, you know, to be leading on these conversations, because, you know, everything we do has a cost, has an energy cost, has a labor cost, but it's about justified cost, and it's about understanding and being conscious of what it is. So I think kind of moving forward, it's important not to get bogged down in policing specific activity, but just having the conversations and raising awareness and doing what we can, and having kind of different levels of action come from that activity over time. That's the ideal.
Thank you. I like the optimism.
Yeah, as I concluded, concluding what I'd say, in Africa, I think in the next 5 years or even 10 years, we will still be struggling in academia with trying to raise a culture or a digital culture in a way that can enhance social impact and public awareness, and maybe in a broader sense, digital citizenship. So only if we can reach to a level where scholars can think critically about you know, the effect, the social effect, and then in the broader sense, maybe existential effect of their academic practice, will the question we are discussing now become part of the agenda. But I don't see that, I don't think that within the next 5 or 10 years in Africa, there will be much, there will not be a leap into suddenly getting people to like choose a brand of computer according to their awareness concerning the impact of that tool. So probably, and as one of the leader in training, at least at the moment in DH in Africa, I think we need to push in this item in the agenda, try to start talking about people, but then how do people become aware if they don't understand what is going on? That's a problem.
Just as a closing comment, and I think the environmental transformation of digital humanities, which is probably necessary, needs to be part of a overall academic transformation of academic practice into a new, also socially sustainable way of doing science. And just in a nutshell, that's my my closing comment or my wish.
Thank you very much to all of you for coming today and for discussing these topics. I'm very glad you were all here, because you really all brought very different perspectives, and that's, I think, exactly what we need to be confronted to these perspectives that we do not have, because we're all a little bit in our academic bubbles somehow. I hope that we will make progress on these topics. What we didn't say, I think, is that we're going to use the toolkit actually for our workshop at the DHD conference in 3 weeks too. So as the basis for a hands-on work in the German area. And I think it would be great also to keep sharing training material, because that probably is one of the common grounds that we have within the DH community, how we conceive these training units that can be more inclusive of environmental issues. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you also to the Maison Française for organizing this and making it possible. And yeah, Have a nice evening. Bye.